It used to be that Fox News had an extraordinary amount of individuals that had diagnosed mental illness. What was Glenn Beck, ADHD, and schizophrenia? And he was on the TV so much that, of course, at some points, he was going to be not only right, but brilliant. This book is the sort of book that either indicates that he lacks reading comprehension, that he will not look at words like Sharia and jihad as what they mean in Arabic, nor their context of Islam. But one thing that also comes in here is that maybe it's not his conclusions as much as it is him compiling secondhand conclusions. Sure, there are mistakes by people who consider themselves to be Muslim, and some of these people are actually Muslim, and they have not done such things to the point where they would be out of Islam. Some people don't understand that we sort of should probably judge people and groups like those groups that we are a part of. If we look at westernized groups and say about that represents the purity of a faith, or it even represents an inflection of a faith, then don't we have to say that the gangs and some aspects of the media and whatever our government does is somehow part of the majority faith in this country? Because most people in America used to be Christian. And of course, we know terrorism isn't so much an act or a type of ethic, it's just causing a reaction. And we'll say shock and awe and not use the word terrorism when it's the group that we favor. And that, of course, is not a fair judgment. Thomas Jefferson had a George Osel translation of Al-Quran. He had a couple Islamic law books, not because of conflict that he had to deal with later, which wasn't from what a person would call devout Muslims in the first place. But perhaps you can reach people by knowing about the Ghazawat and the jihad ayats. There's no S in the plural, but you know what I mean. That if you know about those 165 verses, if you know about those 43 expeditions that were ordered, then some of the offhand comments that a person may get, are stepped aside. And yes, jihad is about a life, and it's an inner struggle, but the lesser jihad in the actual hadith is, the battle that you go off to. Living the life is what it's all about. And we need to remember that in the Islamic world, the actual Islamic world, not just where there's a majority of Muslims or there's a higher amount of them or some of them are in government positions or however you're going to define that you actually end up realizing that they don't believe in charging the jizya to those who have not started wars with the Muslimin and stuff like this. The context in the Quran and in the Hadith is always the oppressors and the aggressors. These are the only people being fought. And there's no attacking of anything except government and military in a war in the Islamic vision. And we've seen more recently in my country a particular incident where a militarized zone, a group of militants, either with war experience or were about to go to war, with a couple exceptions, how this place was attacked. But when they cleared off the Temple Mount and all sorts of other stuff that went on, did they just kill women and children and abuse captives? No. Their evidence actually points against that sort of stuff. But is this an Islamic State? No. And I mean, if we're going to say that a country should be obliterated because of some mistakes in their government, I'm sure there probably was some mistake in their government at some point. They did condemn all such acts and said that if anybody's known to have committed such things, they'll be appropriately punished. I'm not sure what they mean by appropriately, but you know what I mean. What Western government isn't going to have even a worse slate in terms of all that stuff? Some people who aren't very intelligent will try to quote Surah 47:4 and 8:12 to try to claim that Islam talks about dismemberment. And it's like, when the battle is going on and you're on that battlefield, it's totally different. You find that that sort of punishment was not the thing. Nobody's cutting off heads and using them as trophies and all that other stuff like a particular person running for president in my country has just said all over the TV that, that even those who did not commit any offenses in a particular group, that we should line up their heads along the borders on stakes. And honestly, Thomas Jefferson and some of the other ones that were influenced by some of the freedoms of Islam didn't want to grant the rights to slaves and women and orphans and stuff that, and even the poor, that Islam had granted. America was set up not in the Islamic way of a constitutional democracy, but it was set up as a constitutional republic. And some of those rights that, Islam had before, America or France or whatever, they've enabled us to stay together as a country. And no, there's not laws against blasphemy or apostasy or disbelief that an Islamic State supports. And it's like ISIS. Do you know what ISIS is? Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. And Daesh was founded by a son of a New York rabbi who was trained by Mossad. And they've never fought Israel. A people who for 58 years, according to the UN, has not allowed any property rights to be reliable for the people that they call Palestinians. They've driven out, in the course of their existence, there's, 15, 20 million people. I don't remember the exact number, but, that's, it's their country. They've been driven out. They're the true invaders from the north and all that in the Bible. Al-Qaeda, again, not a terrorist organization, according to CNN in September of 2001, the beginning of the season, it was a group of war vets. People, you'd see a sign that you could see from the street that you had somebody from Al-Qaeda talk. In Washington State, was it Olympia or something? There was a conference I went to, and all it meant was you're a war vet that was on the American side against the USSR. The America had actually been involved in your training. That's it. Iran, it's had more religious freedom and all sorts of stuff than a lot of places, and it was Islam that allowed some of those things to come past. Now, some things went too far, you know, a bit too much shock and awe and scraping faces with razor blades and stuff like that in their starting, and a lot of what people claim are religious things. It's like, no, somebody criticized the government. Are they going after Jews? No, no. If you support Zionism too much, it doesn't matter what you are. It can be a problem. And a caliphate, again, is not just, Muslim people being in charge. It's not some kingship. Muhammad himself was chosen by the people to be their political ruler. And these people at the time, probably 90% of them were not Muslim. There were some runners-up and stuff like this, and were they cast down? No. Was people that claimed to be a prophet other than Muhammad, were they punished for that? No. There's no evidence to indicate that. You'll find in some of the narrations that people had idols at home, that people even took idols to the masjid, and they were told, this is just not right, this is not what we're doing. Did he have the person attacked because the guy came to prayer, some people came to prayer and statues and stuff fell out of their clothes and amulets and charms and stuff? There's a difference between a talisman and an amulet and a charm and that sort of stuff, because a charm and an amulet, it's like it has its power, or some entity other than God has its power, and that's the idea. A talisman means something that completes the ritual. Like some people have a clay thing that they put in front of them, or some people have a prayer rug or whatever, and it's like, as long as you don't believe that this has the power or something. Or they have a ring that reminds them of something. But if you literally think that some ring is going to make you choose the right, then, a lot of people from Saudi Arabia don't know about Wahhabism until they move into the West. Ibn Abdul Wahhab is not justification for anything the first, second, or third Saudi kingdom has done in particular that people may point out and cause issues with. Wahhabi is basically hate speech. Basically, it's the Unitarians of the thing. They want to be more direct about their faith. It's sort of a fundamentalist movement, but it's sort of filtered through the interpretations of the earlier generation rather than just the tales of what were passed on about what Muhammad taught. By tales, I don't mean anything particular. Even a weak hadith tends to be stronger than a news narration, right? Now, you do find people that justify some of the stuff that happened after Muhammad died, particularly after you get past Ali, and even more so once you get past Hussein, which Islamically you can't really whatever, but there is problems with sects, but it's not a problem with Islam, it's a problem with political issues for the most part. And contrary to popular belief, the issue that you're going to have somebody, it's going to be a liberal. It's almost never even going to be a conservative. That's going to be this rare exception that they can put all over the news. It's going to be liberal, perhaps a reformist. A reformist is like, well, I don't have to follow the law, I have the spirit. And a liberal is somebody who puts away some of the religious and family values. Well, it's all religion, right? But, the religious and family values for the sake of something, that they personally want. Either it's, some social thing or whatever the case may be. Another phrase he does not get right is fi sabilillah. It's not just in the name of, it is according to the principles of. So there's no fi sabilillah just saying, oh, I'm going to dedicate this to God. You got to have some sort of thing. It's like, what is actually taught here? And one criticism, somebody in a country like America that has so many laws that pretty much everybody's a, misdemeanor offender and a felon, if they want to look into you and, lock you up or something like that, there's something for most people as a felony and almost everybody else as a misdemeanor. Even if you're like a law-abiding citizen, you don't intentionally ever, do anything. Islamic law is not just what some scholar comes up with or what's the case in some country. It's what's actually, what Islam enjoins. And most of that is something you never enforce on anybody. It's like once your kids are accountable, they hit puberty and all that. It's their choice whether they want to pray. I've never made anybody pray myself. If they want to join me, they can join me. If they want to watch, they can watch. I, may make the TV be off. I may insist about that sort of thing, or nobody walks through my prayer space or anything like that. But, nobody has to do anything. And, you can't force people to accept Islam anyways, because it doesn't count the way that it does in some other faiths that, if you get baptized and proclaimed, then you're one of them. No. You have to actually practice the faith. And if you go long enough without practicing certain things like the obligatory prayer, there's no funeral for you. No Muslim is allowed to do your funeral prayer. It is so easy to show that the claims about women being unequal in Islam are completely not true. Men and women pretty much cover the same body when you consider the sexual sensation of their own body, not what people consider of whatever, oh, she's pretty in, this way. And it's like, well, if if that's your thing, that's not on them, right? And there's stuff about, in regards to both people, the testimony of a woman is not equal to that of half of a man. The Quran doesn't say that. None of the hadith say that. People take things out of context, and you really find that women, one woman can testify, and that will count. There's women and men are different, of course, and women are given certain advantages when it comes to marriage and stuff like this. If anything, it sort of sounds like women have more rights than men do. But, it balances out. And women aren't considered less because, they're in the back during the prayer or to the side or something like that. It's like, well, they are considered better because of that position. The men are considered better because they're going up front. Everybody can listen. Everybody can go along. Everybody can correct the person leading, even the prayer. So, that's out the window. And they want you to be moderate. But see, that's the problem, is when people are compromising with certain, what you'd call Western values, that's when the crime goes up, both by and against these people. And I'm not just talking about the drug use. Alcohol and tobacco are drugs too. Islam, a lot of people are moderate when it comes to the drug thing. They're like, well, I can drink coffee and all that. It's like, well, coffee and caffeinated teas were not considered allowable to the early Muslim generation. It wasn't just, oh, well, as long as we're not drinking alcoholic beverages, people knew right away, what's necessary for recovery from illness or survival. It's a different story. Just like you can eat pretty much anything if you're not like, yes, I get to do this thing and all this stuff. As long as you're doing sparingly to get by, it's, no fault on you. If somebody, the saying stuff that's not true, if somebody says something that's not true, well, that's not allowed, except, if it's necessary in war to save a life or that sort of thing. You're not allowed to. Now, you do have to be careful the way that lawyers and police act or something, but you should be able to testify on your own behalf. It's not that sort of thing. That you're lying so you don't get into trouble. Now, if the punishment, like the American prison system or execution, is not the right punishment, well, something might be able to be said about that. It depends on the situation, but you're not lying to lie. I've never lied to get out of trouble. It's certainly not something like some of the Yazidi groups that you lie to outsiders as a principle. Taqiyya is another word that people don't know what it means. I've talked about the Christian way and how the Bible, the Pauline section of the Bible, does support that sort of lying to kind of trick people into the faith or something like that. But Islam has no backing of that. You're having regard. The taq is you're having regard of the situation. So like if you talk about God-fearing, God-fearing is not really the right answer to the whole thing. Just like pretty much every community, they seek to live under their actual interpretation of law, whether they're liberal, fundamentalist, conservative, reform, whatever. And certain situations that cause refugee crises and stuff like that, and dictators and stuff supported by the West, or the West interfering with their, like in Saudi Arabia when America came in and helped kill all those people who wanted democracy. There was a rebellion against the state, and that rebellion was about their rights. But, so how do you expect that not to bounce back at one's country eventually anyways? And people make mistakes on both sides of wars, whatever, but Islam has pretty much condemned almost every war. And don't get insulted if you're a veteran or whatever. They just have the ethic that you don't let, just like in the Bible, you don't fight for your country. And if you were convinced that something was the case, and people have presented false evidences on the news or whatever, that's, perhaps you're innocent for the things that you did. Now, if you're one of these soldiers that relished in the bombing of villages and you knew that was what you're doing and all that stuff, that's sort of a different story, right? But then, Islam, unlike, some teachings of the LDS Church and some other churches, there's no point of no return except death. People may think that there's some sort of secret multi-stage plan, but things start with an awakening. You get some ideas and you eventually connect this awareness to other things. Then you might want to live a principled life in terms of your reaction to others, your political involvement. And eventually you want to cause changes. And it's not about collapse. It's about shifting of principles. And then, there's no population-based thing that, here's a majority or here's not a majority. A believer is somebody who wants things for others that they want for themselves. So they would want people to believe. They would want people to live an Islamic life. They would want people to have the rights of an Islamic state, the lower taxes and stuff like this that would be inherent in that. And they do sort of, work towards that. But it's not inherently oppressive. And if there's anything like that, they get some sort of Machiavellian thing or whatever that you don't get from Islam. There's no ends justifies the means. You don't have to respect or even tolerate all sorts of things. The Islamic approach to certain things is, yeah, you speak up and react against certain things, and other things you may just go away, right? You don't keep company with that. You don't favor it, whatever, because like movies, if the word gets out that there's something in a movie or a television show, you just don't watch the television show. Even watching it, not even spending your money in a way that it's going to matter to how you're spending money. You have a TV or you have electricity or a computer or something. You just, if people want to set aside the idols and all that stuff of their own country, that's fine. If you're not attacking people so that you can conquer their place of worship, it really should be your right to do with all that stuff as one wants. Why should we preserve the lies of the past? Now, if we have graven images and all sorts of other stuff out in public, we really should preserve the history. But there's a difference between recording history and just, okay, well, this place isn't being used again for that, so let's use it for this, right? And Islam does not allow the attacking of places of worship or religious communities or any of that stuff in its idea of war. Attempts to reform Islam is where all these problems have came from in the first place. If they understood and address people as if they actually understood, like I'm having somebody make all these comments on my channel about, it's like, I'm not a New Ager. I comment about pretty much anything. And, if it sounds like they don't know what their problem is with the LDS church, they're just commenting as, oh, you said stuff about that. It's like, do you even know what I said? What did I say? I don't think they even know. If we want to defend our position of beliefs and rituals, a lot of people don't like to think of them as rituals. Some of the Protestants are very ritualistic, and they'll have rituals that have nothing to do with religion as a replacement, whereas a Muslim tries not to have a secular life. And yes, you actually do enjoy life more when you step away from the mundane completely. But, just, other people did it. Other people made this conclusion. Okay, it helps to be able to defend these things. Glenn Beck gave at least one speech about, you go on a mission and all that. You know why you believe what you believe. That's why the Jamaat Tabligh group is so important. The congregation of the preachers. And they've been outlawed in about a third of the countries of the world, I think. But, their behavior isn't outlawed, but the group is. I think because the group, they just allow that, so they ban the books in some countries and all that stuff. And some countries it's banned, but they're like, the police look the other way because they know it's the right thing to encourage people that are both of the faith and not of the faith, but their focus is the people of the faith, because there's more than enough Muslims to join together and actually have that caliphate that they want, and spread it to countries where people are oppressed that aren't Muslim majorities and stuff like that. And that's what people fear. They fear their business. They fear whatever. They don't fear they know deep down that there's no forcing of religion and stuff like this, the people running the media and all that. But the people in charge of the people running the media they feel threatened in terms of their own sense of power or money. You know, that thing about the rich man and the wealth and the eye of the needle, you know, just like a camel taking off its load so you can direct it through a tiny gate of the city. You know, sometimes the rich person has to give charity. This book ends with that "all lives matter" phrase, and they do. Why is that? Why is that an issue? If there's injustice, Islam, for example, makes it about anybody who has some sort of injustice. You know, it's completely addressed. And why do you want to go out of your way to offend people, to make people feel oppressed, and then act like you're the victim? You know, why is that? You know, why are we blaming the people who want their system of life, who want to live according to their principles, and want a fair chance at life? You know, it's not about any particular religion. It's not about any particular heredity or nationality. It's a bigger thing than that. If a person reads Al-Quran and a contextual selection of hadith, you find out that all these death penalties they talk about, they're from Christianity and other places like that. You find that since World War II is when most of this stuff was. And most of the rest of the stuff started with the colonialism also, or is it the other way around? Most of it started with the colonial period, and then a lot of the stuff was even after World War II, if not, you know, World War I. World War I started a lot of stuff. I guess it depends on what you mean by most, right? Is it most in terms of aspects, or is it something else? Let's be real. If the issue is about souls, you know, you need to encourage and build up in yourselves whatever are the beliefs and practices that you personally have. And if somebody is legally of your faith, if they are actually of your faith, if they are a strong believer or excel in anything particular in deeds, you look up to that, and you know, you give them special preference in terms of relationship, not by prejudice, but by other things too. And this helps yourself and society, whether the person is of your faith or not. The opposition to Zionism, or the Kaiser Nazi system before that, is not the same thing as opposing people for their heredity or faith orientation. Because as we find with a lot of the people that are labeled as Jews, it's not really either, is it?